I met Marie on 15 year back. We were both of hard to get in northern Iraq of Syria. I'd constructed a ship to crucifix the Tiger inland out of truck internal tubes and bits of timber and mainly line. Yet I got seized and was shipped behind and in the journalists' bar. No one would say to me since they all mind I'd corrupted their chances of receive in. Later Marie walked in and she told, who and wherever is the boater? I put my brush up and she told, boater, can I buy you a scotch? How was the begin of he? Following how Conroy bumped in the Saturday Times Usborne reporter several times. As a inventive picture journalist in a such flavor for the box of fight, he was aware of her repute. She was well hard and several photographers she treated in found her terrible. And she would fair dumping them if they didn't fitting. Marie and I treated along in Libya for the Saturday Times and one day down there was a guy who was to fill in for me for a pair of days. But nearly at one day Marie was on the telephone proverb get behind there now, she'd already shipped the guy off 300 miles and she never tell to him once again. By the cable, aimed by movie maker Chris Martin, doesn't try to depict Colvin as an lightweight fellow. He remembers he was shooting in the Caribbean while he heard of her die. Or I saw content on YouTube of gender captured in Syria. I saw how the human beings I was work in were very worried on his destiny and I knew at one day down there was a history to be said. Conroy says the town was the evident point of support of the history. By the government of CEO Bashar al-Assad saw Homs as the main center of uprising and was prepared to stampede disagreement down there. Conroy says fair receive in was hard. We consumable a 1 week or two in Beirut manufacturing contacts. Of down there we went up in the mountains among Lebanon and Syria, wherever we met in members of the complementary Syriac troop, a friable against Assad coalition. They took us above the boundary at overnight period via mine, winding troop checkpoints. They later presented us above to else block of the complementary Syriac troop. It took on 3 days to go 30 many kilometers. But the just way in Ram Amr, the portion of Homs very receive clogged, was by the tempest leak on 4FT top. We went via it curved dual and transport all our package. We were stretched out of the tube, deserted in the behind of a lorry and ran the structure of Syriac forces. Conroy says the few journalists about Homs were aware of the risks. I was said by a Lebanese resource how Syriac by the government politics was to murder any journalists and later fall the bodies on the battleground. It was a terrible position and the movie makes how really precise. Martin makes no apologies for possessing imbued in graphic gaps in the story. We went to emergency lengths to discover live video content. A lot of it was fair, the odd 5 seconds undertaken in Homs by activists. It took a large sum of monitoring downward, not fair in the Medium East. We found things love a Skype urge done of the journalists' basis in Homs at the time the missile strike. Martin acknowledges the is not the way a movie love the might include been done just a few year back. We had fair 3 or 4 persons protocol of content that gender had shooting, all else was ruined while the missile strike came in. But we did discover several length of the tube and though of gender and Marie in Homs work on which rotated out to be Marie's recent chunk of journalistic. So we pieced along how file in our interviewing in gender and in the bequest of Edith Bouvier and William Daniels, and of Whale their courageous interpreter. How was the spinal of the movie? But Martin says the document marketplace is change and as a outcome he solved he necessary to fire top quality additional content to bind the history along. The manufacture crew decamped to northern Morocco to phase a release of the Tempest leak succession. Further interiors were shooting in London. The handicraft skills on screen indicate the document frequently has the sense of a so-produced characteristic movie. Documentaries loved by the cable are now mostly departure to be seen at first on theater produce, he says. They're not fair for TV. And if thou're in cinemas thou're competitive in characteristic films that might price $100 meter, £77 meter, or more than. So we include to attract the spectator. We can't wait audiences to go and discover the history on our regulation. The CEO Matthew Heinemann has as well been at job on the lifetime of Colvin. Individual warfare, that in portion tells the identical history, is due for produce the year. But Heinemann has done a characteristic movie, starring Rosamund Ling as Colvin and in Jamie Dornan as Conroy. In actual lifetime, Conroy just implemented behind in London how ill same D been wound in the assault that annihilated Colvin and Aucklick. Apparently I knew I had a enormous opening in the behind of my foot. But in London I found out I as well had a large big chunk of shell fragment sandwiched by my kidneys. I had 23 operative on my leg and other on my stomach and behind. I was in clinic for 5 months. Down there's yet a history to be said in Syria. I can't though start to say how deep I pity Marie and Remy moribund. But do I pity departure in and hard to do our work? Completely no. By the cable is on produce.